In 2025, the wilderness revealed its most unpredictable and unforgiving side, turning ordinary hikes into scenes of sudden catastrophe. These 5 cases stand out as the year's most disturbing hiking deaths, each telling stories of shock, danger, and the terrifying speed with which a peaceful trail became a fatal trap. In the shadow of Mount Nama's towering peak, what began as a thrilling adventure for a young climber ended in tragedy. The mountain, rising 18,332 feet or 5,588 meters, in China's Sichuan province, is renowned for its steep slopes, icy crevasses, and unpredictable weather, an environment where even the most experienced can face mortal danger. On September 25, 2025, Hong, a 31-year-old first-time visitor to the peak, found out that the mountain is unforgiving terrain. Hong, who held only a climbing assistance certificate and occasionally led hikes, was not a professional mountaineer. Relatives described him as enthusiastic about outdoor challenges, drawn to the breathtaking vistas of high-altitude landscapes. On this occasion, he joined a group attempting to summit Mount Nama, a technically demanding climb situated in the Ganga mountain range of the eastern Tibetan Plateau. The ascent involved a 15-kilometer trek to base camp at approximately 4,800 meters, followed by a steep, ice-covered climb requiring crampons, ropes, helmets, and ice axes. Hong's expedition, however, did not follow the mandatory protocols. His group had not obtained climbing permits, nor shared their plans with local authorities, a critical step designed to regulate ascents and ensure rapid rescue in emergencies. This turned out to be only one of multiple missteps that would lead to tragedy. As the climbers neared the summit, Hong paused on a steep, snow-covered slope. Eyewitnesses reported that he untied his safety rope, detaching himself from the line securing him to the group, in order to take photographs of the surrounding landscape. At that moment, he was not using an ice axe, a key tool for stability on icy terrain. Attempts to regain balance reportedly caused him to trip over his own crampons, the metal spikes affixed to boots to provide traction on ice. In an instant, Hong lost footing and slid uncontrollably down the mountainside. A video circulating on Chinese social media captured the horrifying sequence, his body descending the slope, disappearing over an edge covering an estimated 656 feet or 200 meters before stopping out of view. Fellow climbers watched in shock, powerless to intervene as the fall unfolded. Rescue teams from the Kangding Municipal Education and Sports Bureau were dispatched immediately. But unfortunately, by the time they arrived, Hong had already succumbed to his injuries. His body was later recovered at an altitude of approximately 5,300 meters and transported to nearby Ganga mountain town. Officials emphasized that the absence of climbing permits and the failure to notify authorities complicated the rescue and increased the risk of such an outcome. Local mountaineering representatives reiterated that Hong's actions, removing his rope and neglecting to use essential equipment, were critical factors in the fatal accident. The aftermath of the incident sparked widespread attention online, with video footage circulating across Chinese social media and generating discussions about the dangers of high-altitude climbing. The event showed that even minor lapses in safety at extreme elevations could be fatal, highlighting the importance of proper equipment, adherence to established climbing protocols, and awareness of environmental hazards such as ice, snow, and crevasses. Hong's death has served as a sobering reminder for amateur climbers. Technical peaks like Mount Nama demand respect, preparation, and strict observance of safety measures. For Hong, a first-time visitor to Mount Nama, a momentary decision to prioritize a photograph over safety resulted in a devastating and irreversible outcome. The incident stands as one of the most disturbing hiking deaths of the year. On the morning of November 17, 2025, the iconic peaks of Torres del Paine National Park in Chile loomed under deceptively calm skies, drawing dozens of international trekkers to the challenging O-Circuit Trail. Among them was Victoria Bond, a 40-year-old British PR professional from Cornwall, known for her extensive travels and love of outdoor adventures. What began as an ambitious 4-day trek across one of Patagonia's most celebrated landscapes would soon turn into a nightmare, as a sudden blizzard transformed the exposed trail into a frozen death trap. Victoria had built a career in public relations spanning luxury fashion and tourism, including a role as a PR manager for Visit Isles of Scilly and earlier work at Harrods and Condé Nast. Friends and colleagues remembered her as adventurous and meticulous, someone who had traversed parts of the Himalayas and relished high-altitude hiking. On this expedition, she traveled with 4 British companions: Christian Aldridge, a 41-year-old TV director, Matt Smith, 39, Tom Player, 39, and Haley Noonan, 41, alongside a larger group of international hikers, including Mexican couple Cristina Calvillo Tovar, 37, and Julian Garcia Pimentel, 36, and German pair Nadine Lichet, 45, and Andreas von Pine, 52. The O-Circuit is a 130 to 140 kilometer trek encircling the Torres del Paine Massif, featuring remote sections, exposed ridges, and significant elevation gains, with John Garner Pass marking its highest point at 1,241 meters. The group began their ascent to John Garner Pass around 5:30 a.m., initially encountering only light drizzle. Within hours, conditions deteriorated catastrophically. Winds reached 193 kilometers per hour, visibility dropped below 3 meters, and temperatures plummeted to -5 degrees Celsius, with wind chill far below -20 degrees Celsius. Whiteout conditions and icy slopes rendered navigation nearly impossible, and the hikers, many without essential gear such as crampons, ice axes, or helmets, struggled to maintain footing. Survivors described sliding uncontrollably down frozen inclines, attempting to dig heels or brace with walking poles, while snow, sleet, and howling winds battered them from all directions. Exhaustion, frostbite, and hypothermia quickly took hold. Victoria and 4 others, Christina, Julian, Nadine, and Andreas, did not survive. While some of them were initially still alive when located by improvised rescue teams composed of fellow hikers, attempts to stabilize and transport them proved tragically unsuccessful. Christina was brought down on a makeshift stretcher, but suffered cardiac arrest before reaching safety. Nadine succumbed despite being wrapped in hot water and blankets. Julian and Andreas were found deceased on the slopes, unreachable for immediate aid. Victoria, despite being close to her companions, vanished in the blizzard, and her body was later recovered along with the others. The remaining hikers, many doctors, provided urgent care in extreme conditions, but the severity of the storm and lack of timely professional assistance made rescue nearly impossible. Contributing to the tragedy was the absence of park rangers at Los Perros campsite and along the pass, due to Chile's compulsory presidential elections on November 16th through 17th. Staffing reductions left hikers without on-site monitoring, up-to-date weather evaluations, or organized emergency response. Forecasts underestimated the storm's intensity, predicting winds of only 100 kilometers per hour. Survivors emphasized that the O-Circuit's optional guiding system and reliance on public weather apps created further risk for those unfamiliar with Patagonia's sudden and violent storms. In the aftermath, Chilean authorities, including President Gabriel Boric, extended condolences to the families of the deceased. CONAF pledged to review safety and communication protocols while the formal investigation into potential negligence began. The incident highlighted both the lethal power of Patagonia's weather and the dire consequences of insufficient preparation and oversight, particularly on highly exposed technical treks. For Victoria Bond, a skilled, experienced traveler and public relations professional, the disaster was a tragic end to a journey intended for adventure and challenge. The loss of all 5 hikers remains one of the most harrowing and disturbing fatalities recorded on the Torres del Paine O-Circuit, an unwanted reminder of nature's unforgiving force. In the spring of 2025, the sweeping cliffs of Bryce Canyon National Park drew travelers from across the country, offering vast views of the hoodoo-filled amphitheater that made Inspiration Point one of Utah's most striking lookouts. For Matthew Nannen, 45, and Bailee Crane, 58, a couple who had recently arrived in the state after spending significant time in Arizona, the overlook promised another moment in a life defined by constant movement. But beneath the stillness of the plateau, the icy edges and unstable footing carried a silent danger that would soon turn their visit into one of the most disturbing instances of hiking incidents. Matthew and Bailee were believed to be living out of a U-Haul truck and had traveled through the Southwest before reaching Bryce Canyon. Little is publicly known about their personal histories or the circumstances that brought them to Utah, but authorities confirmed their last known address was in Florida. With them on their travels was their elderly female tabby cat, later named Mirage, a 12-year-old companion who remained with the pair through the final hours of their journey. Inspiration Point sits along a high plateau at the upper level of the Bryce Amphitheater, an area visited by thousands each year for its panoramic views of towering rock spires. Protective railings line the lookout to separate visitors from a steep drop of roughly 380 feet. On April 28th or April 29th, Matthew and Bailee crossed that barrier. Snow lingered across the area at the time, making the ground slippery and limiting traction near the cliff's edge. Detectives later confirmed the presence of warning signs, and preliminary findings showed that the couple had climbed over the railing between the trail and the precipice. Exactly what happened next remains unknown. The Garfield County Sheriff's Office reported that the cause of the fall could not be conclusively determined, and investigators continued to examine all possibilities. What is clear is that sometime late Monday or in the early hours of Tuesday, Matthew and Bailee fell from the overlook, plummeting approximately 380 feet into the ravine below. On April 29th, park visitors spotted their bodies and alerted authorities. As search and rescue teams descended the ravine, they soon discovered something unexpected: a ripped, mud-covered, soft-sided pet carrier. Initially mistaken for a backpack, the carrier held the tabby cat who had survived the immense fall. Mirage was bruised, matted, and sore when recovered. She suffered fractured ribs and fractured canines, and veterinary teams later identified fluid around her heart. Despite her injuries, she remained alert, friendly, and responsive. First brought to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, she received emergency treatment and was transferred to a specialty veterinary hospital in Las Vegas. Her recovery was swift, and staff described her survival as remarkable. Blood work remained normal, and she soon began eating and drinking on her own, responding well to care and attention. The sanctuary initially sought to locate the couple's extended family to determine whether a relative wished to adopt Mirage. When no arrangement was secured, she was placed for adoption consideration. Among the rescuers who had found her that day was Utah Department of Public Safety pilot Chelsea Tuga, who had never forgotten the unlikely survivor. With the blessing of Matthew and Bailee's family, Chelsea ultimately adopted Mirage, offering her what the sanctuary described as a second chance and a safe, quiet retirement after an unimaginably violent fall. The incident prompted continued investigation by the Garfield County Sheriff's Office, which noted that the couple's decision to bypass the railing appeared to be a contributing factor. The deaths of Matthew and Bailee stand as one of the most disturbing hiking fatalities of 2025, underscoring the unforgiving hazards that can arise when safety barriers are ignored, especially in winter conditions. While their loss marked a devastating end to their journey, Mirage's survival offered a rare moment of solace, a fragile thread of hope emerging from a tragedy on the canyon's edge. In the spring of 2025, 40-year-old hiker and amateur wildlife photographer Charles Gibbs set out for what was meant to be a peaceful afternoon on the trails of Montana's Glacier National Park. He and his wife, Glenda, had spent the day exploring the remote landscape near Elk Mountain, an area known for steep slopes and sweeping views. The couple often enjoyed long hikes, and for Charles, the possibility of encountering wildlife was always a welcome part of the experience. But as daylight began to dip toward evening, the environment around him shifted in ways he could not have predicted, setting into motion a disturbing series of events. Charles had a long-standing fascination with wildlife, particularly grizzly bears. Friends and family described him as someone who admired the animals deeply and approached the outdoors with respect. His interest in photography gave him another way to connect with the places he explored, and he often carried his camera while hiking. On April 25th, he and Glenda were making their way down the mountain when they spotted a female grizzly, accompanied by 3 cubs traveling across a distant slope. It was around 5 p.m., close to the time they had planned to begin heading back. Seeing the bears ignited Charles's instinct to capture the moment. Glenda continued toward the car, leaving Charles to take photographs from what initially appeared to be a safe distance. The images he captured later revealed how rapidly the situation escalated. One photograph showed the mother bear watching him directly, her posture alert. The final picture, taken at a distance of only about 50 yards, showed her beginning to charge with her cubs following behind her. As the threat became clear, Charles attempted to retreat, running down the mountainside in search of safety. His efforts led him to climb a tree, hoping the elevation would shield him from the protective mother bear. Rangers later concluded that the bear was likely around 400 pounds and responded instinctively to defend her young. The evidence indicated that she reached the tree, pulled Charles down, and inflicted severe bites and scratches to his head, arms, and legs. Blood traces found at the site suggested that Charles briefly managed to escape after the bear's initial attack. He made it roughly 50 feet from the tree before the bear overtook him again. The second confrontation proved fatal. Authorities noted that Charles had carried a firearm during the hike, but Glenda later explained that it was consistent with his values that he did not attempt to harm the bear or her cubs. His deep respect for the animals, she said, made it unthinkable for him to shoot, even in a moment of imminent danger. When Charles did not return that evening, Glenda reported him missing. Search teams located his remains the following day. Officials recovered his camera, and the photographs helped reconstruct the sequence of events. Park spokeswoman Karen Whitney confirmed that the injuries were consistent with a defensive response from the mother grizzly. Authorities emphasized that the bear's behavior was instinctual and that she would not be harmed. Assistant Park Superintendent Alan O'Neill stated that Charles understood the risks involved, adding that in this situation, the human was the intruder. The tragedy deeply affected both the park community and the broader public, especially as the details of Charles's final moments emerged through the photographs he left behind. His death underscored the dangerous nature of encounters involving grizzly bears with cubs and highlighted the need for distance, awareness, and adherence to strict safety protocols around wildlife. While Charles's passion for the natural world shaped his final hours, the incident stands as one of the most haunting and unsettling hiking fatalities of 2025, a stark reminder of the dangers present in even the most beautiful landscapes. On the morning of June 19, 2025, 33-year-old Hazma Benhilal stepped into the clear mountain air of Banff National Park with a sense of anticipation that matched the rising sun. Known for his warmth, discipline, and eagerness for new experiences, he had been looking forward to the day's hike to Bow Glacier Falls. His excitement set the tone from the moment he woke at 7 a.m., unaware that the hours ahead would place him at the center of a heartbreaking tragedy. Hazma had traveled from Surrey, BC, with two friends, including 28-year-old Khaled El-Gamal, who had become both a close companion and a trusted confidant. The two men had met in 2022 while enrolled in an online MBA program, later moving to Canada, sharing a home, and establishing a bond that felt more like that of brothers. Hazma, originally from Morocco and working as an engineer, was known for generosity, calm wisdom, and an instinctive ability to support others. Khaled, originally from Egypt, admired the steadiness and kindness that shaped Hazma's character. Their trip to Banff had been a brief escape, inspired by a recommendation from a hotel worker who suggested Bow Glacier Falls as a scenic but less crowded alternative to the places they first planned to visit. That morning, a third friend chose to stay behind, leaving Hazma and Khaled to make the drive to the trailhead. The hike unfolded exactly as they hoped. Dozens of photos, light conversation with other hikers, and a shared happiness that made the ascent feel effortless. The men walked along the 9-kilometer trail bordering Bow Lake, taking in the dramatic terrain that drew visitors from across the world. As they neared the waterfall, they chose to climb higher to capture better photographs to send to their families. Hazma's enthusiasm carried them upward, closer to the base of the falls where the mountainside towered steeply above them. Shortly after 1:30 p.m., the sound that cut through the canyon was unlike anything they had heard that day. Witnesses later described it as thunderous, a deep rupture that echoed off the rock walls. A massive section of the mountain had fractured. Boulders broke free and cascaded downward with violent speed. Hazma stood directly in the path of the slide while Khaled, momentarily frozen by the shock of the scene, remained just behind him. The first impact shattered rock into flying debris, and the slope gave way in a chain reaction that sent stones of all sizes rolling and crashing toward the hikers. The force of the rockfall was catastrophic. Hazma urged Khaled, who stood frozen in shock, to flee. Immediately after, he was struck with overwhelming impact, and he died instantly beneath the collapsing debris. Khaled attempted to flee, but was hit repeatedly as the slide overtook him. Stones struck his legs, back, head, and shoulders, fracturing his pelvis and scapula and leaving him bleeding, disoriented, and barely able to move. He shielded his head with his arms and endured repeated blows as the rockfall continued around him. When the slope finally went still, he forced himself to stand despite severe pain and began descending in search of help. Other hikers reached him, kept him awake, and stayed with him until emergency responders arrived. Rescue teams faced immediate danger from the unstable terrain and were unable to locate Hazma that day. His body remained buried beneath the debris until the following morning, when conditions allowed recovery crews to return. The rock slide had also killed 70-year-old retired Professor Jutta Hinrichs and injured 2 additional people. Parks Canada later stated that nothing could have predicted or prevented the sudden collapse. In the days that followed, grief settled heavily over everyone connected to Hazma. His older brother traveled to Calgary to arrange the return of his body to Morocco, facing significant financial and emotional strain. Friends and family described Hazma as selfless, encouraging, and committed to lifting others up, a man who loved Canada and wanted his family to see the beauty he had found there. For those who survived, the trauma of that afternoon continued to replay in vivid detail. Hazma's death stands as one of 2025's most devastating reminders of how quickly the mountains can turn deadly, bringing an abrupt end to a life defined by kindness, ambition, and generosity.